You ever notice how people like to say, I don't play games? They say it with pride, like it makes them honest, clean, above manipulation. But here's the thing, everyone plays. The moment you enter a room with another human being, the game begins. You might not see it, you might not even believe it, but your tone, your timing, your posture, they already signaling something. And that's exactly where dark psychology lives, in the space between what's said and what is done. Let's start simple. Dark psychology isn't about evil, it's about influence without transparency. The moment someone shapes your thoughts or decisions without you realizing it, that's it. It is not black magic, it is behavioral engineering. The uncomfortable truth. People love the idea of free will. They want to believe every choice they make comes from logic or who they are. But you would be surprised how predictable we are when someone knows where to look. Imagine this: you in a cafe, you pick the table near the window, not because it's so-called you, but because the light there subconsciously makes you feel visible, validated. Now picture a recruiter sitting across from you who knows that. He complements your sense of confidence just slightly. Boom, you've been profiled and he's inside your frame. That's the entry point of dark psychology. Observing patterns, mapping motivations, then using them to steer outcomes quietly. Three levers of control. Every psychological influence operation, whether in marketing, politics, or personal life, runs on three levers: fear, ego, and belonging. Fear makes people move fast. You introduce urgency, you add scarcity, you don't ask. You force the brain to react. Example: offer ends tonight. Last spot left. People are already talking about it. Fear hijacks reason. It's efficient, ugly, and ancient. Ego. Ego makes people defend lies they don't even believe. You don't challenge them, you feed their self-image. You strike me as someone who doesn't settle. I trust your judgment. The moment their pride locks in, logic checks out. Belonging makes them follow without realizing it. Humans are social code junkies. The brain reads approval like a drug. Everyone in your field is doing this. It's trending, or it could be phrased like you would fit perfectly in this circle. Belonging turns resistance into cooperation. You can combine these three and make people believe it was their idea all along. Morality in the shadows. Now, here's a paradox. Dark psychology itself is neutral. It is a scalpel. It can heal or it can harm. A therapist uses it to guide, a marketer uses it to sell, a manipulator uses it to control. Same tool, different intent. That's why pretending it doesn't exist isn't naive, because someone will use it and it might not be you. The mirror trap. The easiest person to manipulate, someone who believes they can't be manipulated. Because when you're sure you're too smart or too aware, your guard drops. You stop double checking your instincts. And that's when subtle mirroring takes you down. Try this experiment. In your next conversation, mirror someone's breathing, posture, and last three words casually, not like a robot, and within like a 3 minutes, they will feel so-called connected to you. It is primal synchronization. The brain reads it as safety. In other words, when you acting and saying in the same way as another person, that person think, oh, this person looks like me, like, or like I think like me, therefore he like I can trust him. Now imagine what happens when a skilled operator uses that intentionally during negotiation or interrogation. You will swear you trust your gut, not realizing it was reprogrammed in real time. The language of suggestion. The English language is a weapon system. Each phrase you use carries a payload, emotional, logical, or chemical. Ever heard a sentence like, don't think about the pink elephant? Boom, you just did. The brain cannot process negation before visualization. Or this one, if you were to feel completely relaxed right now. That, if you were to, bypasses resistance, it sneaks straight into imagination. These are called presuppositions, language that implants images without direct commands. Every good negotiator, therapist, or interrogator knows this trick, and yes, every con artist too. Framing reality. Reality isn't what happens, it is how it's framed. If I say, the meeting was delayed, you shrug. If I say, they're buying time, you start to suspect a strategy. That's framing, the art of assigning meaning before facts appear. Whoever frames first controls perception. This is why governments, medias, and corporations invest millions not in facts but in framing. And that's the point of brainwashing. When, like, the difference between just information and brainwashing, that information just tells you about what happened. But news, which has a purpose to brainwash you, also framing you, and simply speaking, they tell you how you should approach this information, in which way. In other words, they are replacing your own conclusion. Like, instead of coming to that conclusion by yourself by critical thinking, they replacing that, and to the type of information, they tell you how you should approach it, in negative way or in positive way. Once the frame is built, the mind fights to stay consistent with it. People will ignore evidence just to preserve the story they already accepted. That is not stupidity, that's cognitive inertia, the cost of mental comfort. Microcontrol and predictive behavior. Okay, let's go deeper. Influence doesn't just shape actions, it predicts them. Every app, every platform you touch is built on predictive microcontrol, algorithms that learn your desires before you do. You think you're scrolling randomly, you're not. You're being profiled, segmented, and guided into micro modes that align with commercial goals. And the scariest part, it works because your brain likes it. Predictability feels safe. Dopamine spikes with pattern recognition. You crave control, so when the system gives you a little illusion of it, your personalized fit, you reward it with loyalty. You don't need a handler, you already built one and call it so-called recommendations. So, in other words, these algorithms guiding you in a direction, and for you, it seems like natural, but it's obviously that they got their own purpose for, like, specifically for you. Emotional echoes. Dark psychology often hides in emotional echoes, things that feel familiar but unreal. A manipulator doesn't create emotion, they recycle it. They study your past reactions, what made you laugh, flinch, or soften, then recreate it in a new context. Ever wonder why a toxic person always knows exactly what to say when you're almost done with them? That's the echo. They are playing emotional cues you already rewarded them for before. It is not intuition, it is data from memory. Your own brain became the instruction manual. So, in other words, simply speaking, they reverse engineer, they analyzing your emotional patterns, like what kind of things, topics triggers you, and just they just keep repeating the same topics and framing you in again, like in negative or positive, and their main goal just to get their own benefit. But for you, again, it feels like so-called natural. Ethical application. So what do you do with all this knowledge? Simple. You observe, not absorb. You learn to see the strings without pulling them. Because once you recognize dark psychology, it loses half its power. You start catching the hidden pivots, the pauses, the micro compliments, the subtle scarcity plays. You don't need to use it to manipulate others. You use it to defend your frame, to control your reactions instead of being controlled by stimuli. The most powerful person in the room isn't the one talking, it is the one who knows why others are talking. And here's a real world map. You can spot dark psychology daily, the influencer who uses we instead of I to create tribal unity, the boss who pretends to ask for advice but already decided, the ad that says smart people choose blah 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 to exploit identity over logic, the partner who apologizes without ownership. I'm sorry you felt that way. These aren't coincidences, they are tactics, subtle emotional geometry engineered to tilt the room's gravity towards someone else's agenda. Building immunity. And here's your toolkit. First of all, label emotions. The brain loses 60% of emotional charge once you name it. Second, delay response. The first answer is emotional, the second is strategic. 3. Watch patterns, not promises. People lie with words but reveal truth through repetition. That is very important. Words almost means nothing. Actions means everything. 4. Ask many questions. Why am I being told this now? Is often more revealing than what you told. 5. Detach your ego. The less you need to be seen as smart, the harder you're to play. You can't erase manipulation, but you can become unprofitable to manipulate. In other words, if you want to defend yourself, you have to understand this kind of manipulator psychology. The final reflection: you don't win the game by fighting every player, you win it by understanding the board. Dark psychology isn't a monster in the shadows, it is a mirror. It shows what power looks like when stripped of politeness. The question isn't whether it exists, it is whether you are willing to see. Once you do, you can never unsee it again. And that's where real awareness begins, not in fear, but in precision. Thank you for listening. Smash the like button, subscribe button. See you next time.